Bailey was diagnosed with cancer when she was just 17 years old. She had a tumour in her brain and she was barely 18 when she died. She didn't show many signs at first, just some headaches every now and then. They weren't nice, but she dealt with them, and we thought it was just an awful phase. But then they got worse, until she couldn't cope with them without something to numb the pain, and I started to worry a little. Addie moved his hand to my back, and I pressed closer, breathing heavily. She started to be sick, and we all stopped panicking. The headaches must have been an early onset symptom, we thought, and it was, just not of a common bug. She was ill for a week, throwing up on and off all day. During that time she was at my house, not her parents', sleeping next to me at night, and so every time she woke in the night, I'd wake too, going with her to the bathroom and back, holding back her hair and stroking her cheek until she fell asleep again. She started being ill at mine, and we didn't want to move her when she was so poorly. I'm sure her parents would have much preferred to have her with them. But it didn't pass, and the headaches kept coming, getting worse and worse. After 2 weeks of vomiting, I was worried once more. This can't be normal, I remember thinking. Maybe it's one of those long-term illnesses. It'll pass. Like chronic fatigue or something. But I never did my research. That's what we kept telling ourselves. We didn't think to go and check it all out. We just kept putting it off, making excuses to ourselves and pretending like nothing was happening. Because it'll pass. Bailey herself, even. We just lived our lives as normally as possible, going through each day like anyone else. We were ostriches, sticking our heads in the sand to wait out a storm, but this storm wouldn't pass until we did something about it. Remembering this is possibly one of the hardest things. Addie's hand moves to the small of my back, his other holding my shoulders steady to try and stop their shaking. It's futile. Most mornings she would rush straight to the bathroom to be sick, feeling nauseated until about 11, even varying sometimes to last until 3 p.m. Her spatial awareness went next, and so she kept bashing into things. At first, just stubbing her toes a little more often, or misjudging the distance between her and the table when putting down her drink. There were a lot of spilled drinks during that time. Looking back now, I realised some of that was probably her eyesight failing as well. All that time, we put off seeking medical attention. I denied there was anything wrong. So did her parents and mine. So did both of our friends. So did she. We just wanted it to all be all right, to act like it was all fine. We didn't want to face reality. The final straw was when she was over at mine one day. I left her standing in the living room while I went to the bathroom. 2 minutes, I was gone. I came back and she was on the floor, shaking violently. I didn't know what to do. I'm ashamed to say that I panicked. I didn't call anyone straight away, but just stood staring at her. The guilt of that still eats away at me today. When I finally pulled myself together, I called Addie to come over and help me hold her still, and if I'm really honest, to support me emotionally as well. Only when he arrived did I call her parents into an ambulance. The entire time I was waiting for him, I sat next to her on the floor, tears pouring down my face, attempting to hold down her flailing arms and getting hit so many times in the process, all of which later turned into bruises. But I didn't care about that. In the crisis, it turns out, I'm useless. I can't keep thinking about this. I take a deep breath, deeper than any before this. It doesn't calm me, but it makes Addie move his hands to the back of my head, cradling me to him like a little kid. I need to do this. Come on, Luke, get this over. Just the sight of her on the floor rendered me helpless, so the most I was doing was holding her hand and attempting to hold down her other arm. When Addie arrived, he rushed straight through and knew exactly what to do. Put a cushion under her head, he said. Hold down her arms and legs. Talk to her calmly. Make sure she knows you're here and it's going to be okay. But all I did was hold her hand. I couldn't speak. I was too focused on her bubbling mouth, the sweat dripping from her forehead. Too focused on her thrashing limbs and anguished expression. For someone so small, she had a lot of strength in that moment. But Addie talked to her, and held down her legs, and put a cushion under her head. I did almost nothing, just watched the girl I love in pain, thrashing about. I didn't help her. How could I live with myself after that? The ambulance arrived not too long later, but it still felt like an age. Her parents came running up as they carried her out on a restraining stretcher. I rushed beside her, keeping up with the stretcher, tears still streaming, but I couldn't go with her to the hospital. She was only allowed one person, and so her mum went with her, leaving me to pace at home, running my hands through my hair so many times that all of the gel came out. Eventually, Addie managed to get me to sit down, getting me a hot chocolate to drink in case I went into shock, and getting Isaac and Tommy to come over as well to help distract me. I didn't protest. I didn't even stop stressing once to think about how her father must be feeling. He just watched as his little girl was taken away in an ambulance and then had to go home to two even younger girls, both of whom would pest him for answers that he could not give. He would have had to hold himself together and not let out everything he wanted to for their sakes. He had to be a good father and cook dinner and lie alone in bed, worrying the night away. What was I doing this whole time? Blubbing like a baby on my sofa, drink gone cold and abandoned on the coffee table. The boys came and put on a film, but I just sat in the corner of the sofa the whole time. My tears were all dried up, and having cried until I couldn't, I just stared vacantly into space. They didn't attempt to speak to me or make me respond, just chattered and messed about as normal, even in the sombre atmosphere. No matter how hard that was, it would have been a lot harder if they hadn't. I still cringe at the way I acted that day. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for it. Addie's mumbling something that sounds underwater, but his tone is calm and comforting, and I let him rock me slightly, the back of his top clutched tightly in my fists. She was in hospital for a week. I went to see her a couple of times, smiling as though nothing was wrong, and holding her hand, trying not to look at the tubes in her arm. She was chatting away like she was sat at home on the sofa, happy as ever, and smiling and laughing. Almost all the way until the end, she was like that. Always such a little thing. It was a seizure, they said. Probably nothing to worry about, but considering the other things she'd had going on recently, they took a couple of scans, a couple of tests, and then the tests came back a week after she'd been home. Thinking about this is like reliving the horrors all over again. The image from one awful day after her diagnosis surfaces in my mind, and for one awful moment I can see it again, the saliva I'm trying to swallow getting caught in my throat as bile rises. Its acidic taste makes me feel sick, and I feel a tear roll down my cheek, hitting Addie's shoulder, but not making much difference to the cloth. It's already soaked. Her parents drove us to the hospital, and the four of us sat in the waiting room, smiling and joking, but behind all of our eyes there was a sadness, a grubbing dread of what was to come. Except for Bailey. She just kept talking and smiling once more, keeping up our spirits as best as she could. I could see in her eyes that joy still danced like flames that were impossible to quench. How she could face something like this with happiness and a smile, I have no idea even to this day. I kept bouncing my leg up and down nervously until Bailey reached over a hand and placed it gently on my knee, smiling reassuringly. I smiled back, trying to be brave for her. Why was she the one reassuring me? I should have been looking after her, not the other way round. I wasn't the one who had a seizure. I wasn't the one who was about to receive life-changing results. Bailey, her mum and I sat on the seats, her dad standing behind us, one hand on the shoulder of each of his girls, preparing to hold them steady when the news came. When it came, Bailey didn't need it. Her mum turned ashen. Her dad breathed in deeply, in and out, not stopping. I just sat there, hands shaking a little. I should have been standing next to him, supporting them like he was, but I was sat there in a chair, letting him do it all himself. A malignant brain tumour, they said, in her astrocytes. Apparently there was a very clear anaplastic appearance, meaning that it was quite well developed, a stage 3. We're not going to lie, they said. It's not looking good, but we'll do our best and use our best methods to get you better, we promise. What little hope that gave me. I just stared, stricken with the news. Is this reality? Is it really my Bailey who this has happened to? Then her mum spoke up, voice hoarse and cracking slightly on each word. How long do you think if it doesn't work, how long? I hold my breath, all of our eyes now on the doctor. I'd say 15 months at the most, so if there's anything you want to do now would be the time to do it. I took a shaky breath, eyes back on my hands. I'm so sorry. I wish that my news was better for you, but like I said, we'll do our best to try and help you and prevent that. Bailey just smiled bravely, being the first to stand and shake the doctor's hand, thanking him. How could she do that when she'd just been given what was effectively a death sentence? But that's just Bailey. Always positive, always happy, always thankful for everything, even if that includes being diagnosed with terminal cancer. I expected tears, but my eyes stayed dry. Even in the car on the silent trip home, as I said goodbye, and as I lay in bed that night, his space next to me empty, they still didn't come. Her mum and dad wanted her at home and to break the news to her sisters. They didn't invite me over. I didn't ask. I think that we all needed to sort out our heads. I would have preferred to have her next to me, to hold her in my arms all night and never let go, to bury my head into her soft hair and breathe in her scent, to forget the world and just love her like any normal 21-year-old. But I doubt that will ever happen again. 15 months, that's how long I had left of the love of my life. with the girl I thought I'd spend the rest of my days with. And now I'm sat on my best friend's sofa, tears pouring down my face, soaking his top. A complete mess. I haven't spoken to her family since the funeral. It's too much pain. I can't even look after myself anymore. My mother comes around most days to help with the house, to wash and clean and cook and check in on me. I don't see my friends often, and when I do, they may as well be babysitting. Is this really life? I never imagined a life without her, and now I realise that's because there isn't one. There's just existence.